Hello and welcome to step 4 of your individual development project for BMGT 640 organizational behavior. We are going to complete the final steps in your leader network diagnostic through this video. Feel free to press pause as you need to and come back to the video as you're completing steps in the leader network diagnostic. So we're going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of effective networks. And what research has shown is that effective networks really balance bonding ties and bridging ties. What do we mean by this? Bonding ties are a measure of the interconnectedness between the members of your network. And they also are a measure of how deep, how close, how trust-filled the ties are between the people in your network. Let's look at an example. We have Jane and Joseph who have networks of similar size, but Jane's network on the left has many more bonding ties than Joseph's more sparse network on the right. You can see that the people within Jane's network are highly interconnected. There are many connections between them. So bonding ties can offer many benefits to your team. Interconnections between members of your team creates increased channels for communication between you, which leads to increased solidarity between team members. You really stand up for each other and have each other's back. Stronger reciprocity norms. You're more likely to return favors to each other, which enhances the relationships. Greater trust between team members. You trust your team members to be on your side. Sanctions against self-serving behavior. So team members are reluctant to do things that are selfish or don't benefit the team. Enhanced knowledge transfer. Team members share tacit information better. So they're better at sharing that day-to-day tools of the trade, tricks and tips that maybe aren't written down anywhere. And finally, higher commitment to the team, which enhances performance. So now we're going to have you complete a thought exercise. The thought exercise is in Moodle under the next step of the Leader Network Diagnostic Individual Development Project first deliverable. So after you read through these questions, you can pause the video and go back to Moodle to complete the thought exercise. So take a look at your network diagnostic, the steps 1 through 5 that you've already completed. Is your network interconnected or sparse? And that you can tell by looking at step 3, the openness step. And so the openness score will tell you the higher the score, the more open or sparse your network is. The lower the score, the more interconnected your network is. What are the main factors that are contributing to how interconnected or sparse your network is? And are there examples where a more interconnected network would have been beneficial for you? So how do deep relationships benefit your team? First, those strong trust-filled relationships between people on the team help you develop the skills that your team needs. Your team knows the organization well, perhaps, and can steer you in the right direction and can provide you with helpful and constructive feedback to make you a better team member. And perhaps they can enable you to borrow their status in the organization. Your team members can vouch for you and highlight the good work that you're doing. And these folks can perhaps champion the ideas that your team is producing with those at the higher levels to help you get those ideas implemented. So what makes a deep relationship? Often the difference between weak ties and strong ties is a matter of reciprocity, trust, and frequency of contact. So reciprocity means that the relationship is mutually beneficial and there's a bunch of give or take between the two people in the relationship. On the other hand, low reciprocity indicates that perhaps this is a one-way relationship and one person perhaps is doing all the giving and the other person is doing all the taking. A trust-filled relationship often is exemplified by strong commitment between the two parties and an expectation of responsiveness. They know that if they email you with a question, they can expect a quick response. And then a certain amount of self-disclosure. You open yourself up to the person and let them know a little bit about you. And then finally, not always, but often, strong ties are more frequent interaction. So you're more likely to feel a really close relationship with somebody with whom you interact with on a regular basis. We're moving on to the next thought exercise now. Feel free to press pause on the video so that you can complete the questions in Moodle. But I want you to think about how many deep, trust-filled relationships you have with people who can maybe give you access to information you wouldn't get to otherwise, people who can help you develop your skills, and people who can vouch for you, perhaps with the higher ups in your organization or your career path. And then I also want you to think about perhaps what are some of the barriers to forming those types of relationships. Effective networks also balance bridging ties. So bridging ties are the connections that bridge otherwise unconnected people. And often there are connections that also cross organizational boundaries. So we've got another example here of an open bridging network and a more closed bonding network. You can see that Joseph and Jane have similar numbers of people, but Joseph has a network that is much more interconnected, and Jane has a network that is much more open. So the benefits that Jane enjoys are pretty clear to see. She has connections with people who are different kinds of people. If you consider that the blue, green, magenta, and orange might indicate different areas of expertise, for instance, then Jane has access to lots of different kinds of expertise. Whereas Joseph, in part because his network is highly interconnected, but also in part because he's mostly connected to green folks, does not have access to the same level of different kinds of expertise that Jane has. So how do bridging ties benefit individuals' teams? When individuals have ties that bridge across any kinds of boundaries, often their teams can benefit from greater access to outside resources that those team members provide, faster access to vital information, and perhaps access to diverse ideas and viewpoints, which might help that team be more likely to produce creative solutions and have the leverage within the organization to implement those team solutions. So what boundaries should your network cross? We examined a number of different kinds of boundaries. Vertical boundaries are across levels and hierarchy within the organization, where horizontal boundaries are really across areas of expertise. Stakeholder boundaries are when you have ties that go outside your main organization. Demographic boundaries, we focused on gender, but of course there are many other kinds of demographic groups that your network can cross. And then geographic boundaries, when your network reaches outside of your main geographic location. So individuals whose networks cross these types of boundaries provide access to diverse knowledge and resources that can help their team to generate effective solutions. So now we'd like you to conduct a thought exercise around boundary crossing. Which boundaries does your network currently cross? And what boundary crossing might enable you to help your team be more effective? What additional boundary crossing? And finally, how easy do you find it to cross boundaries when forming ties? And what are some of the stumbling blocks that you've experienced? Feel free to press pause on the video so that you can complete this thought exercise in your Moodle lesson. So to summarize, in your network diagnostic, we've asked you to think about how much your current network matches up with what effective networks look like. How many bonding ties do you have? How deep are your relationships? And how many bridging ties do you have? How diverse are your contacts? We ask you to consider the following. Why does your network have the structure it has? In what ways is your network well suited to accomplish any goals that you have? And in what ways is perhaps your network falling short? Briefly think about 3 things you'd like to change about your current network that might help you be more effective. And we'll ask you to further develop these ideas for improving your network in deliverable number 2, which is due later this semester. There are a number of different strategies that you can use to develop and craft your network. Building strategies include ways to add new members to your network. And then maintaining strategies are ways that you can deepen and organize and manage your relationships. Whereas leveraging strategies are ways to go about actually using your networks to gain benefit. And then finally, transition strategies are really the strategies where you realize that perhaps a network contact is not as beneficial as they used to be, and it's time to transition out of that relationship. So as you go forward, you identified 3 changes you'd like to make to your network. Deliverable number 2 will ask you to expand upon those changes. And then deliverable number 3 is going to ask you to identify networking strategies you can use to make those changes. You will use materials outside your course materials. You'll do some outside research to come up with some strategies that make sense to you. And you will explore those possibilities further in deliverable number 3, which is due later in the semester. Next steps, submit your completed Leader Network Diagnostic as a PDF in the Moodle lesson. And then your final step will be to complete the post-training survey. Once you do that, you will have completed the assignment.